Okay, we had some issues there, closing out of episode 1. I guess it's always good to check the memory and storage space on your device before you start filming. Oops. Things we live and learn as we go, huh? So, I was talking about building the T-55 by the old ERTL kit, and we were working on the running gear. I was trying to get the drive sprocket together and put a piece of track link in there to make sure this was positioned properly. So we have a road wheel together, and we have the rear idler wheel also done. And there's a few, I guess it's got what, 5 road wheels. Oops. Yeah, that's your set of wheels here. And some other equipment there. One thing I find kind of entertaining in a way about modern, actually not even modern Russian tanks, they've been doing this for a while now. So, tanks have a tendency to get stuck in snow and mud, and they get bogged down. So, some countries have come up with these interesting, like, channels and skirts things that they stick under the tracks to pull the vehicle out. But the Russians came up with a very interesting way of solving that issue. Basically what they did is they get a log, L-O-G, log, and they would just strap a log to the tank, and when they get stuck, they just put the log down and they just drive over the log. It's a very brilliant idea from the Russians that, you know, you don't need a complicated metal produced, factory made channel or something to drive over. Just get yourself a log. Economical, smart. Okay, so I'm going to continue with this. I was talking about some of the marking options we were thinking about with these kits, and it's a couple of Iraqi ones which have, the sand colored paint with some green overspray, and they have a couple of Arab numbers on there, which you can get a set of those pretty easily. And another thing that they tended to do for the different units is they would just add a color to the gun barrel on the fume extractor, and then where the stripe was, the white stripe on the yellow tended to mark what platoon it was in. Very simple, but an effective way to paint an Iraqi tank. So the markings with the original ERTL kit were for, basic overall green Warsaw Pact communist tanks of either the Soviet Union or for Poland. And those are certainly options. I've seen a lot of pictures of Polish tanks. Some of them were camouflaged in the summer with brown and green, and of course all of these would have been whitewashed for the winter, so white's an option as well. But there's so many different ways to paint these things. I mean, really, because when you look at how many countries use these, many options, which is kind of interesting. And I've got some other pictures here. Oh, these are two T-62s. Speaking of which, we were doing some of those in the model program too last year. And this is a T-62 from Tamiya, which is very close to being done. This was done by a middle school age girl. So she did a great job with this. Just needs a couple parts and some paint, and that was done. But anyway, and this is a pretty nice kit, simple to build. Detail is a little dated now, because there's certainly better kits out there, but it's still a pretty nice kit. Went together well, and worked out well for her. So anyway, let's get back to this, as we were cut off. All right, so I was working on the hull, and I'll do a few more things to it. So I'm kind of in this step. I put some of the wheels together, but not too many. But I want to get these the torsion bar, suspension, the arms to put the wheels onto the hull, and get some of that together now while we can, so that the chassis starts to take shape. And I'm looking for C23s. Leave these right here. Find the number, yeah. Get some of those ready. 5 per side. So as I said in the last episode, these are projects we're working on in our model building workshop here at the Smith Hill Library, which is part of the Providence Community Library, comlive.org. And we were doing these just before the pandemic hit. And these are basically stranded and abandoned models that have been sitting here all this time. So, try to clean up some of this. So there is some cleanup to do on this ESCI kit, but nothing terrible. And as I mentioned last time, I've built a number of these because I got them at a very affordable, a ridiculously affordable price at a bargain store here in Rhode Island. So I built 3 myself. So I did one for Syria, one Iraqi with some aftermarket parts, and I did one as a Croatian tank, which had a kind of a light green with some dark green and some brown spots on it. And like I said, this one I don't really know what I'm going to do with this yet. I have a few thoughts, but we'll see. All right. So these do have a slot. All right. They can only go in one way. It's going to pop in. It's going to notch in here. So that should prevent some problems, we hope. So with these, if you were really creative and had a set of individual track links, you could take, there's a notch on these pieces that pops into the hull here. You could remove that notch and then put these suspension arms in different positions if you wanted it to be rolling over or climbing over something. You could change the position of the wheels and the suspension to make it fit the contour of the land in your diorama that you want to put this on. For example, I've seen a photo in a model magazine where they had a tank that was going over some railroad tracks, and you could see that the track was going, the treads were going over the railroad track, which I thought was pretty cool. It takes a bit of work to do that, but if you were so inclined, you could do that with this kit. Okay. Now in the back, there is this drive mechanism here for the drive sprocket. There's a different one for each side. This is number 70, which is going to go on this side I'm working on now. Oops. Get that in position, cut this off. Trim this down a little bit. Not too bad. Like I said, it needs a little cleanup, but it's not horrible. Nothing that an X-Acto blade and an emery board can't fix. All right, let me get the proper alignment of this. Yeah. It does leave an odd shape on it, but it is my assumption that that'll be remedied. Like I said, I built these before, but it's been a while since I built these. So the drive sprocket's going to go into there somehow, like so. I don't want to fasten it in there right now, because I want to get that at the end, because I want to get this ready and then put that stuff in. Oops, that's awfully loose. It's surprising on this kit. I believe the Tamiya kit has the rubber stoppers in here, so you can push them on and they would stay. You definitely have to glue these because these are going to fall right out. Very loose. And I'll do that later when I get the rest of them together. So, let me see, there's a front part for the idler wheel. Let's get that one together, C32. Which is over here. Excuse me. All right. Let's get that. So as you can see, once we get going, this isn't too bad to put together. Takes a little time, but it's not bad. Oops. A little more cement in the right places would help that tremendously. And it's kind of a loose fit, but there we go. Give the cement some time to set there. Okay. All right, so we have one side of the torsion bar suspension going there. I'm going to jump ahead. Look at the time here. Okay. Don't get too carried away and get lined up with too much. Get the whole top. Okay. Whole top. So I do have a few different market conversion parts for some T-55s. Not that I have anything wrong with doing this as is, but because this is a great kit as it is, I think. But I do have some other stuff at home that I may want to look through my parts boxes and see what's sitting around before I get too carried away with this model, because, for example, I think I've got a different, engine deck part that was left over from another kit. So, like I said, I'm debating because of parts that are lying around that I could use and put to good use here. And there is a turret that's been partially assembled with this kit. If I want to continue to honor the student that was working on this, or if I want to modify this, I don't know. It's good to have choices. I'm not completely sure what she was going to do with this kit. It's basically, this is an activity we used to do on Friday afternoons, pretty much in the time slot where the premieres of these videos are. For those who actually watch this show live, that would have been the time when we would have been doing this in the building at the library. And it was a group of kids that came and worked on model kits, and it was also a social event for them because they would be, you know, working on your models and talking about your day at the same time. So it was a very fun group and a very lively group that was sitting here working on this stuff. All right, I don't want to get too carried away with this, but I want to give you an idea of some of what goes on this. We did have some other things here. We had worked on a tank crew, some figures, and we had some Iraqi tank numbers and slogans here that we may or may not use. Not sure yet, but let's take a look at some of the parts that go on the hull. Okay. Let me get my chisel point, because I want to get these, it's like cast metal pieces that were here that would go with the turret overhang. These little semicircular pieces. It's a little piece of ick. Just keep bending it around and around here. There it is. Okay. That was 34, 35 standard tree, so this one is going on this side. So that goes on, yeah, right. Goes on here. You can see that. So the turret turns. This is underneath the turret. Oops. There it is. It's essential that we get this flush and flat, so that the turret can turn freely and not hit part of it. Typical of a Soviet tank. I'll show you. Oh, we didn't get it done on that one, never mind. It's still to be done on the T-62. But it's generally a lot of spare, you know, the fuel tanks would go down, exhaust pipes go there, and these storage boxes. So the outside of the tank is rather busy because there's not a lot of room inside for storage. So the storage on a tank is usually on the outside, because the inside's too busy with ammunition and equipment for sighting the gun and so forth. So any storage of tools, etc., would be outside. And there are lots of photos. Including the Gulf War in 1991, where you'll see, like especially the Americans and the British, is that they would have their armored vehicles and there would be all kinds of stowed bags and canvas things all packed on the sides of the tanks, you know, for their tent and sleeping stuff, food, whatnot. They'd have to carry it with them. And they would all be stuffed in these bags along the sides of the tanks. Common thing in World War II as well. Oops. Especially in the desert, in the battles in the desert, you would see that the British, the Germans, and the Italians would have all kinds of gear all stuffed along the sides of their tanks. Because it may be out, they might be out in the hot sun, out in the desert for a while. So they'd be loaded up with spare water and et cetera, et cetera. Again, make sure it's nice and flat. Just gonna do a couple more things here. We'll probably wrap this up in a minute. I want to get one of these fuel tanks down so you get the idea. So this is a pretty straightforward build. You know, there's front fenders, and in a way they can be optional because in battle sometimes these things would come off. You get these storage boxes, you do have to put those together, and I'll just show you on another diagram. One of the tough parts, because these diagrams are a little hard to read, although that's why I cut them, you know, blew them up, because the original instruction sheet was this big map-like thing, which is really difficult to read. So these are photocopies of, you know, zoomed in parts of the diagram. But you're going to see that the headlight assembly, and that tends to be a little tedious there. Certainly not impossible, but you got to just take a deep breath and kind of work your way through that. So let me try to get one of these fuel boxes down. Let me see. Let's stop one. Here's one. And what's fun with these is they have, you know, nice detail in there. So if you wanted to detail this tank up a bit, say if you watered down a little bit of like black or brown paint with some thinner, and you just gently dip your brush and put that watered down paint in there, it would fill in where the impression is there, and you'd get like a stain that would sit there like of oil and whatnot, and it would kind of bring out the detail. It's called a wash, and then that would really bring some of that to life. All right, so noticing that this could be a little better explained here. Overhead view of where that would be. It's going to go like that. So it's going to go back like so. There's going to be a bunch more. And a few other parts, the engine deck, etc. Okay, well, I think that's enough for today. It's about 25 minutes worth of filming. Don't want to overload you guys for this episode. But anyway, so that's how the T-55 is coming along, as you can see. The the ESCI ERTL version. I'll tell you what I'll do here. I'll give you an example of how this is going to start to look. You start to get an idea how this is going to go. And we've got the turret here. some cleaning up, but, so it starts to take shape. You kind of get the idea now what this is going to look like. All right, we'll catch you next time on the Model Building Workshop. Have a good day. See ya.